Ian, thank you for the warm introduction and welcome everybody. And thank you for listening to my story. My name is Andreas Forsland. I'm the founder and CEO of a startup company called Cognixion. Um, but a little bit about me. Prior to starting Cognixion, my background is in design. I started my career in Atlanta, Georgia, working at IBM as a designer. Working on their first intranet and other content and multimedia. And then after that, I moved on to, as a part of kind of the early e-business world and e-commerce, went into doing a lot of web design, web usability, and innovation for early Web 1.0 companies such as Coca-Cola, Bank of America, Boeing, UPS, FedEx, and organizations getting into e-commerce and bill pay. Holiday Inn Express and Apple. And then after that, I moved north and joined Progressive Insurance as their creative director for customer experience. And I was responsible for rolling out, sort of splitting the company brand into an independent channel brand and also a direct brand. And then my team was responsible for the customer experience for progressive.com and 1-800-Progressive. And we saw significant gains based on heuristics and some fairly simple design strategies that created a pretty dramatic lift in revenue and retention and innovation at Progressive. Later, I moved on to Philips Electronics. And so I worked at Philips between Atlanta, New York, Amsterdam and Eindhoven, and Sao Paulo, Brazil. And when I was at Philips, I was an innovation strategist and design leader there, helping their healthcare organization, consumer electronics, and their lighting divisions deal with innovation and thinking about second and third horizon opportunities for their product portfolios. After leaving Philips, I moved to California, and I was the design leader there and the senior director of brand experience for Citrix and their software as a service division, GoToMeeting, GoToMyPC, Podio, and a number of other online web services. But the story that I'm going to tell you today has to do with the inflection point of when I left Citrix to start Cognixion. And I've always been interested in applying design for human betterment, flourishing, and well-being. And I've always sort of taken that customer-centric view of how can we look for insights that are below the surface, that are not obvious, that do not show up in satisfaction surveys or in focus groups, but really come through deep observations and interpreting those insights that are actually first principle drivers of those things that you might see in a survey. And so having that skill in my career, what I realized is in my talk today around designing the future accessible experiences, I want to take you on a little bit of a personal journey of how I got here. Specifically, where it started, there was a personal breakdown that I'm going to be sharing with you today that led to a real deep dive into accessibility. I'm also going to talk about what inspired me regarding potential new methods of interaction for customer experience within a product. Also, how we arrived at the final solution through a number of iterative design and learning exercises. And then looking at what the true breakthrough unspoken insights are, and then how an opportunity organically emerged when we started to look at trends as well as where a need is for a visionary platform. And then I'm also going to hint at what a visionary future might look like that's much more immersive, that's tech enabled, but makes it really inclusive for everyone, regardless of your physical or cognitive abilities. So I wanted to start with my story. So in 2012, my mom came to visit with me out in California for her birthday. She was turning 70 years old. When she arrived, she wasn't feeling well. And within a couple of days, it escalated, and it turns out that she had pneumonia. It had it had sort of progressed to the point where it went into septic shock, and she had to be admitted into the intensive care unit here in Santa Barbara. She was there for weeks, ventilated, much like you would see people today with COVID. She was in that kind of state, completely locked in her own body, ventilated, unable to speak, and her arms were restrained to the bed so that she wouldn't accidentally, pull on any of the cables. So you could imagine that one is completely conscious and aware of what's happening around you, but you're unable to speak or move your body. It's a fairly, extreme situation that I was able to observe as her son, sitting by her side, and working with her to communicate on her behalf with nurses and doctors that would come in and visit with her and provide care. But what I observed was that there was this organic communication technique when you're working with an individual that can't communicate, that you rely on what's the next best alternative to oral communication. And where we ended up was communication through blinks, grunts, and gestures was really how she had to communicate. And it wasn't just her, it was anyone that's in the situation has to kind of devolve into a fairly rudimentary ability to confirm yes, no questions or be able to respond in ways that are fairly limited. So that was really the breakdown. But what I ended up doing is a year later, I ended up really thinking about that problem and recognizing that if she had a little stone or something organic that she could hold in her hand while her hand was restrained to the side of the bed, that could do gesture recognition with very simple taps, swipes, or movements, could be programmed to an app on an iPhone that could generate speech. So she could swipe it up to say yes or swipe it down to say no, or she could shake it or drop it and it would send a request for help. Extremely primitive sensor-based communication technology. That eventually evolved in when we started to roll this out, we ended up working with school children, grades K through 12 in special education throughout the United States and in the world, around the world. We became a sole supplier of these SmartStone devices and our underlying application to the New York City Department of Education within their special ed program that has 26,000 children that are on the autism spectrum or have other complex communication needs. But in that discovery process, what we realized was that this was a fantastic solution for a very narrow part of the population. As we started to get into this, we were working with lots of people with certain types of conditions that this would work with. But we encountered far more individuals that needed more complex communication, more robust communication than simple shortcuts for taps for single word blurts. And that really led us down a path of discovery of thinking about what are all of these different kinds of conditions, ranging from autism to Down syndrome to Rett syndrome, aphasia, stroke, dementia, ALS, Parkinson's, MS, SMA, traumatic brain injuries, spinal cord injuries, tetraplegia. What we found was through this discovery process, we went from developing a niche product for a very small use case originally into an expansive, fairly complex and robust market that has yet to be defined, that we spent time defining. Turns out that there's 500 million people worldwide that have a disability that affects their ability to communicate or control their body. And so what we did is we pivoted our company towards creating a platform, aiming at a singular platform that could address the needs with very little personalization required for upwards of 1 billion people, or 15% of the world's population has a disability, including vision, hearing, speech, mobility, cognitive, sensory, and behavioral. For our first market, though, based on where we started, we're focusing primarily on speech, mobility, and cognitive or neurological disabilities. When we look at this, though, stepping back, I wanted to share some meta trends. Thinking 50 years back, we had the baby boom, which we had a huge influx of new people, but also the mortality rate and the average life expectancy was fairly short. Today we're in a period which we call the sandwich generation, where we have multiple generations all living concurrently. We're living longer than we ever have before, but we also see global trends which are concerning regarding low birth rates. Demographers and statisticians are also looking towards the future, towards 2050, realizing that we're approaching what's called a silver tsunami, which is primarily driven by the aging population and the lack of caregiving supports in critical resources for accessibility and caregiving. And not only is that driven by the aging population, but it's also driven by cradle to grave, people born with congenital disorders, people acquiring disabilities such as brain and trauma injuries, and progressive such as ALS or neurological disorders. So it's becoming this a mission for us to be at the forefront of helping to solve this accessibility problem that enables people to do things that they couldn't do before. But I wanted to take a second and just define accessibility for everyone if this is a new topic. But really, we define accessibility for all as designing places, things, and content in a way that enables everyone to participate. But in order to do that, often it's beyond just physical accessibility choices that you're making, such as ramps and automatic door openers. But really thinking holistically around the role of technology and how technology can be part of your product, service, or your buildings or transportation or whatever your business is. Assistive technology, as defined by one of our colleagues that has a disability, which I thought was quite elegant. His name is Gil Addison. Gil describes assistive tech as it makes it possible to have the freedom to explore, discover new things in life, to realize your own potential to be amazing in spite of your physical limits. And I am particularly inspired by that statement. So when we come back and we look at what are the types of tools that individuals with disabilities use, it's extremely fragmented. They're not interoperable, and they're very bespoke to specific features. You have very expensive products, which are effectively features, not products. And they're very difficult to integrate and difficult to train and use. You have analog and digital solutions for vision, hearing, speech, mobility, and cognitive and sensory. So when we started looking at this, we're also looking at the overall trend from analog to digital. If you go back to the 50s again, the user interface was primarily knobs, sliders, and rabbit ear antenna for like a television or a radio. In the 80s, more sophisticated user input technologies were created, such as the keyboard and the mouse and the stylus. And in the teens, we started to see the introduction of touch-sensitive screens for taps, swipes, and scrolling on digital screens. What's fascinating, though, is now in the 2020s, going towards the 2030s, we're seeing an abundance of sensors that are being used that have never been used before. Gesture recognition sensors, cameras that are being used for object recognition, sensors for detecting muscle movement, such as EMG, or even EEG for mental fixation and mental acuity for virtual reality. So we're starting to move towards a much more sensorial future where technology is starting to disappear into everyday objects and becoming just more prolific with how we live and work. And the amount of time it takes to take your phone out of your pocket to interact with it will start to go away over the next 10 to 20 years. When we start to look forward into the 50s, the 2050s, there's work being done in many different areas to start to get at intention detection and miniaturization into regular wearables so that you can intentionally control systems using mind and eye tracking and voice. So it's much more natural. There's work being done on the far fringe of technology, early technology, that is starting to develop things like contact lenses that have displays in them, and also the ability to project imagery onto your retina within the same system. So you're starting to see the radical miniaturization of computing happening in front of us right now. So what's happening today? So we start to look at trends towards much more immersive, stimulating wearables, such as augmented and virtual reality and gesture recognition devices. much more prolific access to interconnected devices. So not just interacting with computer software and games, but interacting with the real world through Google Home, Alexa, Katana, Bixby, whatever your AI of choice is for connecting with smart homes and other controls. The ability for sensors to detect actual cognitive intention and start to predict types of things that you might want to do. Uh, Applications that are starting to leverage data around you, so understanding ambient light or your history, other types of inferences that can be made to help make applications more relevant in the moment. And then lastly, richer humanistic experiential qualities. So if you think about someone like Stephen Hawking, he was known for having a robotic synthetic voice. Well, he was introduced with a more humanistic voice and he declined it because he had such a brand identity around his robotic voice that he felt that that was his identity. Well, we're starting to reach a point with deep fakes and all kinds of other things where AI is able to replicate extremely high quality humanistic voices and imagery. And it's quite powerful if harnessed for good. The reason I tell you that is because we've been working with an advisory council. We've built a 140-person advisory council that we co-design with that represent individuals with severe disabilities that are within our addressable population, that are our first early adopters. Kind of like what Nike did with identifying and scouting up and coming high potential athletes to join them and become ambassadors. We're doing the same thing with individuals in their respective communities within disabilities as a platform. So where Nike says, just do it, at Cognixion, we say, I can do it, and really focusing on empowering the individual to be their best. So we have individuals with cerebral palsy range that are online ministers. We have individuals who have had traumatic brain injuries and stroke that have done TED Talks that have over 1 million followers. We have advocates and attorneys with ALS who are in DC lobbying for Medicare for all, as well as entrepreneurs, authors, and DJs. So these are fantastic individuals that are high potential adults that can basically be prolific individuals, not just to inspire us with interesting content, but also rejoin the workforce and be a contributor to society. So also, we're not immune to life in general. So we've actually just wanted to share in memory of one of our brainiacs who passed recently, Terry Cotini. We came to meet Terry. She was using an iPad with a communication app and a little switch that's connected to her wheelchair. And she would use the switch to scan the screen to be able to select words. It took her about 30 minutes to coordinate the timing for her to select a single word. When we were doing early testing on some of our technology, specifically what I'm holding over her right here, which is a headset that uses augmented reality, she was able to compose an entire phrase within 3 minutes that said, "Hi, my name is Terry." It's radical what we can do when we really listen to the user and start to look for underlying cues, whether that be physical insights or even cognitive insights. Some of the individuals that we're looking to recruit into our Brainiac program and also support with our technology range pretty widely, but these are some of the types of conditions that we're working with today. And ultimately, what we're focusing on is how do we start to minimize thinking about first principles. Personalization is the underlying insight for this many different kinds of disabilities. How can you personalize an experience for so many different situations? And so what we realized is you can't do all of that in hardware, you have to do that in the software. And some of the software personalization has to be done manually, but most of the manual personalization we're looking at, we're trying to think about AI algorithms that can start to be used to automatically personalize it. So with the least amount of input for the user, that the technology starts to adapt to them as opposed to them adapting to the technology. And when we talk about adaptive UI, we've looked at sort of the opposite ends of the spectrum within our cohort in our market. One end of the spectrum on the far end are individuals with chorea with severe spastic movement, such as cerebral palsy, MS, PSP, or Parkinson's. On the other end of the spectrum, we have a completely locked in state that could be late stage ALS, traumatic brain injury, stroke, tetraplegia. And then lastly, there's the caregiver care circle and their role in the user success. So we've been thinking about the holistic 360-degree experience for creating an adaptive system for the end user. So what do the users want to do? So users typically want to, through the waking day, they want to interact with people, places, things around them, and their content. And so we're looking at how we can support them in doing that and have a natural flow that can increase their speed of being able to interact with each of these types of things that they want to interact with. So back out to the trends, some of you all are working in different areas such as 5G or cities of the future or architectural considerations or transportation or hospitality. So I share this slide because this is work that's being done across the board. And a lot of the accessibility work is coming down from the United Nations for Sustainable Development Goals as a great influence. But when we think about what we're trying to create here and what we're learning from our customers, is that we want to merge the mind into augmented reality with an AI companion inside. So think about having a communications partner that's a disembodied partner inside of augmented reality that you can ask questions, you can have a conversation with, you can ask them to do things such as turning on and off the lights or adjusting the thermostat. And this is what we call assisted reality as a category. So I'm sharing with you today a product that we're launching, and this has taken many years of development in co-design with individuals, whether including physicians, caregivers, and end users. But it's a wireless augmented reality system with integrated EEG brain sensors, and it's designed for accessibility from the start. It's really designed to create an immersive experience for individuals with biofeedback and also allow them to interact with less effort using their mental fixation on visual objects. Uh, it's truly designed for stimulation of the mind and body. It includes vibration motors and speakers so that you can stimulate the hearing, the sense of feeling through the skin, as well as visual stimulation. And we're currently working on 3 core applications that are going to ship with Cognixion One. One is a communication application for generating speech in a much more intuitive way and increasing word per minute output for the user so that they can speak at a more natural pace and have conversations and build friendships. Uh, we've partnered with Amazon Alexa to integrate Alexa inside. So we have an AI companion that can help deal with skills, asking questions ranging from sports scores to the weather to facts and trivia, play games, listen to music, and control their environment. And we are also partnering with an organization out of Europe who is making autonomous wheelchair controls, kind of like Tesla for wheelchairs, to interact as a mobility aid with our system. So in closing, I just wanted to share with you around, by taking a user-centric approach, being creative and curious about deep user insights, sort of falling down the rabbit hole like Alice in Wonderland would, and emerging with insights that could be manifested into a platform unlocks really limitless possibilities. And so with that, I wanted to just ask you to, respectively, if you're doing customer experience management work in your respective fields, please try to fold accessibility for all into your mandates in what you're doing and challenge your clients or your customers to help you co-design more accessible solutions.